Well, it's week 2 of the NFL season, and this is the PFN Miami Dolphins podcast. I appreciate you joining, as always. Joined again for the second straight week. Back. Too much fun last week, Dallas Robinson. You had to come back for more?
It was great last week. I had to be back for this one. No, it's great for football to be back. Like, it's, God, so many months of speculation and looking at rosters and the preseason and training camp, and finally we get real football, and it was great to see. It was great to see all the games. It was great to see the Dolphins pull out a victory, and I'm ready for week 2.
What were your impressions beyond Miami? Because we're going to obviously talk a lot about the Dolphins, talk a lot about the Bills, but just beyond those two teams, what were your general impressions of week 1?
Man, I think a lot of offenses didn't look that great, and I think that's a consistent problem the NFL has at this time of year, and with teams doing less and less during the summer and less during training camps. I think you're seeing offenses start off slower than ever, and touchdowns were down. They've been down the past couple of years. Scoring rates have been down the past couple of years, but there were still a lot of good performances, right? I spent a lot of time thinking about the Bengals. That was probably the most surprising game of the week, watching them get upset by the AFC rival New England Patriots. So that was probably the most surprising game. But overall, it was a good week of action. We'll get into the Bills here. I mean, Josh Allen, just absolutely incredible against the Cardinals. That was a game we talked about last week, potentially being a shootout, and it ended up being that. I mean, defense on both sides was really not on the field at all. It was a lot of offense, a lot of action by Josh Allen. But yeah, overall, I think it was a good week 1. I think you saw some sloppiness that hopefully will be corrected in week 2 around the league.
What team surprised you in a positive way? I guess the Patriots are the easiest answer. And what team surprised you in the negative?
Surprised me in a negative, man. I guess I would say the Cleveland Browns, and it's not because I didn't expect Deshaun Watson to be any better. I mean, I think Deshaun Watson, we saw what he was last season when he battled those injuries. Even when he was on the field, he was something like 25th in QBR. He's only played 12 games over the past 2 years, so I didn't really expect him to be better, but I thought that team would be better. I didn't expect them to get blown out by Dallas in week 1. Better than I thought. I'd say New Orleans. I know they're playing the Carolina Panthers, which is not exactly the stiffest competition, but they dominated in every single realm of that game. And New Orleans' offensive line has been much beleaguered this year. They lost quite a few players, but Derek Carr was only pressured on 12% of his dropbacks. It was one of the lowest rates in the past 20 years. It was an incredible performance under center. I don't expect that going forward necessarily, but for week 1 for Dennis Allen, who isn't facing a make or break campaign, who needs to make the playoffs, I mean, it was a really good start in New Orleans.
I was not surprised, but it was kind of amused to see the New York Jets completely lay an egg. I think that was the most predictable outcome I could have seen coming. That would have had the biggest ripple effects, right? There's so much hype on the Jets, and we talked about this last week, going back to, basically the time the 2023 season ended. And I knew that they had deficiencies, and I knew that that's been a team. Look, they've got really, really good defensive pieces, right? They got a lot of good players on that side of the ball. But the Dolphins last year, the times that I watched them, could run downhill on the Jets. And the way the Niners just absolutely loaded up and shoved it down their throat without Christian McCaffrey, no less. I mean, that to me, I think, is a huge warning sign. And we got to be honest, Aaron Rodgers, he had a couple of flashes, a couple of moments where you're like, oh, that's the old guy that we know. But I think over the course of 60 minutes, I don't know how much his body can hang in there. I mean, at this age, and whether or not he's going to be able to sustain. We talked about how they don't need high-level quarterback play. Yeah. I don't even think they got above average quarterback play in week 1.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially when you talk about the defense. I think that one of the reasons I did not have the Jets as my number 1 defense when we did our defense rankings here at PFN was that interior defensive line. I don't think it's as strong as it was last year. Quinnen Williams is obviously an incredible player, but Javon Kinlaw coming over from those same 49ers, I think, has been a disappointment so far. They lost Quentin Jefferson. I think that was always going to be a problem area. They're obviously missing Hassan Reddick too, who is sitting out still. Wouldn't it be nice to be giving up? What is he giving up every week? $1 million or more? Wouldn't that be nice to be able to sacrifice that a week is just to make a point? I would love to be in that position. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers, I thought he had a really good connection with Garrett Wilson, which was nice to see. I think that's going to be the focal point of this offense if they're successful throughout this year. But yeah, I wasn't that surprised because number 1, you're playing the 49ers, so I think we can all accept are probably the second best team in the NFL, maybe first, depending on how you want to view it. So I think that was, one point there. Aaron Rodgers just hasn't played in a long time. We saw it. He's been off the field for a long, long time. He's been out of live action for a long time. this offensive line has a lot of new pieces. 3 of the 5 starters are new pieces. It's going to take a few weeks, I think, for this unit to kind of mesh and be a little more cohesive. I'm not saying they're going to be a top 5 offense by any means. I mean, you still have Nathaniel Hackett calling things. I mean, I think that's a problem, even if, Rodgers is probably the de facto offensive coordinator. But I would expect them to look a little bit better as the season progresses. Just, I do still have faith in Rodgers that he can at least get to that 16 to quarterback 16, quarterback 17 range, somewhere in the middle. I don't know if he'll ever get back to that MVP level he was at, but I do think as the year progresses, they'll be a little more comfortable together and show a little more cohesion.
Yeah, I will say this. I didn't watch a ton of week one. I watched that game, of course. I watched Rams-Lions, which was just fantastic. I mean, great old school football. That was so much fun to watch. I was kind of busy on Sunday, Dallas, not just for the normal reasons. It was one of the wildest days. Look, I've covered Dolphins on a full-time basis basically since 2012. I did some help with them, even stretching back to the Sperano era for the Miami Herald back in the late aughts. I've seen a lot of Dolphins football. I can probably remember with great clarity outside of the last couple of years, maybe 4 or 5 games. They just kind of all run together. Sunday at Hard Rock Stadium was a day I'll just never forget, like for so many reasons. Like absolutely. I was in the middle. I do the WQAM pregame show down here, and it was 10:30, and I'm on one of these StreamYard Zoom situations, and I just keep seeing out of the corner of my eye, my phone start melting, like complete, like notification after notification. They got more and more intense, and then I see our bosses are trying to hit me up. I was like, oh God. And about the same time, the radio station was like, dude, you probably need to go do your job because Tyreek Hill looks like he has been arrested. That's what we thought in the moment. Not the case. He almost certainly, ever since we watched the surveillance video, would have been arrested if he wasn't Tyreek Hill. The Miami-Dade police, their actions and the body cam footage that we've seen were completely out of bounds. It's launched an enormous controversy down here in South Florida. When the mayor gets involved, when the police chief gets involved, it's beyond just your normal, Dolphins player gets in trouble or Dolphins, didn't really even that much get into trouble. We've all sped and probably a little too much in traffic, all that. I wanted to get your thoughts, A, about that entire situation, and B, the Herculean effort that Tyreek then was able to put on the field. 7 catches, 130, a touchdown, the 80-yard touchdown to him, that they would not have won without it. From afar, I can tell you what it was like in person. It was, again, overwhelming and hard to process. And you know what it felt like? It felt like a big moment because you had Calais Campbell, the Walter Payton Man of the Year, getting cuffed, having him come talk to us post-game. I mean, the quotes and, it was, when you're going to be the center of the national conversation. And we knew Sunday that this was going to be bigger than just a normal routine traffic stop.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sign of where I think we are kind of as a country when something like this happens, that it's going to make news, right? We've seen a lot of these incidents around the country. When it involves a high-profile person like Tyreek Hill, it's obviously going to be in the news. And yeah, it was crazy. Like I was trying to sleep in on Sunday. I've got a long day on Sunday too of watching football, and to wake up and see that he was in cuffs and being detained, it was pretty crazy. I mean, it was so similar to the Scotty Scheffler situation from a few months back. Like it was crazy. I really don't know what to think. Like I'm curious if you think like this will be a distraction moving forward. I mean, Tyreek Hill is literally on CNN. Like he's doing CNN hits. Like I do wonder, like, is this going to get to them at some point? But yeah, he was absolutely incredible against the Jaguars on Sunday. You say they wouldn't win without him. I feel like you could say that almost every week, right? They would not win without his performance. I forget who was calling the game on CBS, but when he escaped on that touchdown, they said, "Oh, he's a ghost," and that is such a wonderful description of what he is, right? Just you cannot catch him, you can't ever run with him. It was a great description. But I am curious, like, you're so close to the team, you're around the team every day. Do you feel like this is going to be something that maybe not even just this week, but moving forward is going to be something that you have to keep answering questions about and deal with?
I don't know beyond this week. They're going to have some sort of, they're going to use this as a galvanizing effect to make an act change here in South Florida. They're going to have programs and all that that are come out of this. I think it's going to be player led, and we don't have all the details. We're taping this Wednesday morning, and we haven't got a chance to talk to Tyreek. He's going to speak in a few hours, so we don't know all the details. But it's very clear that this isn't going to be just, hey, look at me, I'm going to sue the police department because of how it was treated. And certainly his teammates, and we talked to Tua, we talked to Calais Campbell, talked to all these guys that are key leaders of that franchise, that I don't think in the moment they really had an understanding of how just awful that was for Tyreek and how traumatizing it could have been. And the fact that, he comes in the locker room, hey, dapping up his teammates, let's go do this. And then he goes and puts up that performance on the field. It's special. It's rare. It's like I would be mind bleeped for days after that, right? And he was compartmentalized it within an hour, 2 hours, whatever it was, and go out there and play. And as far as long term, I don't think it's going to be a big deal long term, but very much it's an issue this week. I mean, I think it's a little bit unfair to have this game this early on a Thursday night, because it is such a significant game for not just the division, but the conference in general. I mean, the Dolphins ascending team, we'll see where they end up. I think they're going to make the playoffs. Whether or not to win the division, we'll see. But for the Bills, this could be the difference between the 2 seed and the 6 seed, right? I mean, it absolutely could. And to have a short week 2 for a game of this magnitude, I don't think it was particularly fair. TV dollars, they rule all and all that. But it is doubly troublesome for me how quickly a turnaround it is with all this stuff swirling around. And I've been out there Dolphins camp Monday and Tuesday. They have availability again today. Monday, that's all the conversation was. Mike McDaniel had a 27-minute news conference. 21 of those minutes were about Tyreek Hill and excessive force and race relations in America and all these big, heavy issues. Yesterday, all the coordinators were asked about it. Tua was asked about it. Every single player in the locker room that was made available was asked about it. And then it's a day 4 story now because Tyreek will speak about it again. The game, we're taping this at 9:20 in the morning. The game is less than 36 hours away. It is, a huge undertaking to prepare in a short week in a normal circumstance, right? Not just your body, but just getting prepared, right? I guess if there is a silver lining, they know the Bills pretty good, so it's not like they're relearning. If they were playing the Seahawks this week, it'd be a different story because that's not a team that you're as familiar with, But I think that it's going to be incredible drama on Thursday night. That game always is. The last time these two teams played was Week 18. It was the last game of the season. Dolphins fans who are listening to this hate that I probably going down this memory lane, but it cost them their season. And I think the Deontay Hardy punt return for a touchdown to begin the fourth quarter completely changed the entire next then obviously the next week when they have to go in there in Kansas City and much of their off-season narrative. They win that game in Week 18. They're hosting the Steelers in wild card weekend. They win that game at home. Like that's a game they're going to win. Instead, they go to Arrowhead. They get bludgeoned, and it's, hey, is this team built to win the playoffs? Can you win these late season games? All these things swung really on a punt return. So there's still a lot, I think, scar tissue just from that. But you should have full 7 days to get ready for this game. You should have the entire build up and all this. Like I'm just now. It's funny. Pull back the curtain for our listeners. Like I was asking you, like as we're going on the show, like, hey, tell me about the Bills because I haven't seen 10 seconds of them this year. That's not what Bills week should be. It's really not. So again, that's my soapbox. It is what it is. Amazon Prime hit the lotto because I think the numbers are going to be absolutely through the roof. You now have Tyreek Hill of all people as this avatar of social change. I mean, to me, it's crazy. I do wish there was a little bit more time to get ready for it, though.
Yeah, man, there's a lot to unpack there. I think that it is interesting on the Tyreek Hill thing that he is the face of social change now. It is interesting from afar. It's Tyreek's obviously been through a lot and done a lot from a legal perspective and constantly been involved in off-field stuff. So it's funny from someone who's not in Miami to see him kind of be the face of this. And you have to kind of separate the two, right? Just because he's been involved in legal stuff in the past doesn't mean he should be treated this way by law enforcement in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's fair to say. I wish this game was on Sunday or Monday night, Adam. I really do. I mean, I'm looking at the Sunday and Monday night games this week. I mean, we've got Houston, Chicago. Yeah, I'm excited to watch Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud, but did anybody watch the Bears this week? That might probably not going to be a great game. I mean, Caleb Williams didn't even pass for 100 yards in week 1. I mean, it was a brutal game. Let's say Monday night is Falcons Eagles. It could be better, but Kirk Cousins could not move in week 1. I mean, that Achilles looks like it's still a problem. I would much rather have Dolphins Bills on Sunday or Monday night and get to watch this and fully enjoy it. Have both teams not quite full health, but as you mentioned, get better recovery and be better prepared for this game. I think it's probably, the Al Michaels effect. Al Michaels is sick of having so many Thursday night stinkers. He said, give me Bills Dolphins in week 2. Let's get the season started on a high note. I mean, all he ever does is complain about how bad that Thursday night slate is. And whether it was Kirk Herbstreit having to hear his complaints, they probably got sick of it and said, give us the marquee game for week 2. Let's get this on started early.
Well, it certainly should be great. I think we have a lot we can break down with that, but I do think we wouldn't do week 1 justice if we didn't talk about that rally that the Dolphins had. And it was really impressive because the first half of that game was as bad as I've seen them, particularly in offense. I mean, their secondary, they were still figuring things out, and their pass rush got cooking in the second half. And I always had an idea that, an Anthony Weaver defense might take a second for them to, get their footing. And Jacksonville's got a lot of talent on that side of the ball. So that wasn't a big surprise. It was an enormous surprise with how sloppy they looked. I mean, they were really, really the Dolphins on offense, how sloppy they looked. And, Tua had this, Hollywood moment, and halftime goes in there and peels the paint off the wall and calls out all the best players by name and really just has the, leadership moment that I think is sometimes overblown, but in this moment it wasn't. Like halftime adjustments and halftime speeches and all that. It's usually, hey, can you execute? And is your team better than the other team? But it lit a fire under them in a way that's really, really impressive. Their defense comes out and pitches a shutout in the second half. They get that peanut punch by Javon Holland. You're talking about turning points of the game. That would have been 24-7. If ETN can get to the end zone there and he strips them out inside the 10, they recover in the end zone. The next play, it's that Tua to Tyreek bomb. And I'm going to say this. I think we saw the good and the bad of the Miami Dolphins in that game. And the bad is sometimes they really, really struggle for consistency offensively. They're going to have some miscommunication on the back end on defense. But that first half was disaster Dolphins. And the second half was, it doesn't matter Dolphins because we have so much overwhelming talent that we'll win with big plays. Is that sustainable for 3-4 weeks in the postseason to win it all? Probably not. You're going to need to be able to possess the football and, march down the field and all that. And not, I think they had 4 drops in the first 3 quarters or something. They had, procedure penalties. I think they got 2 first downs wiped out by offensive holdings. Just really dumb stuff. The only thing they didn't do was turn the ball over. If they had turned the ball over, they would have gotten destroyed. But I do think you see why this coaching staff is so excited about Tua, so excited about this offense, so excited about Devon Achane, who had 7 catches and a touchdown and 100 total yards from scrimmage and all that. They are going to be, it seems like, again, a boom or bust team. And even I don't think Jacksonville, I think the Jags are a very good, very talented team that we talked about this last week is going to be in the conversation. They were in the conversation all last year. They made the playoffs 2 years ago. It's going to be the same deal again. So this isn't one of those, they dropped 70 on the Broncos and it's fun, but what does that mean against the great teams? I think the resilience they showed, the fight, the big, credo that came out of the post-game news conferences was this isn't a game we would have won the last 2 years. They showed grit, big criticism. Tyreek made it after the Chiefs lost in the playoffs. Jordan Poyer kind of made it before the season began as these are front runners. You punch them in the mouth. They don't have an answer and all that. Dude, they got bludgeoned over the side of the head in that first half, and they absolutely had an answer. So warning signs for sure. But if you're looking for, hey, something to build on, the fact that they didn't fold was, I think, item number 1 on that list.
You used the word grit, and that was the exact word that I had in mind when I was rewatching this game before we started. That you're right. In the past, this is I'm never going to call the Dolphins or any NFL team soft, but I think that's kind of the perception is that this is more of a finesse team that when the going gets tough, when they're put in a bad situation, when there's bad weather, that not just the team but Tua specifically can't come through. I think this game, it was sloppy from both sides. I think it was sloppy from Miami and Jacksonville. Self-inflicted errors on both sides. Like you mentioned, Tua dealing with drops. Trevor Lawrence is constantly dealing with drops, and that did not stop in week one either. And the fumble obviously was a game-changing moment. I think even in the second half, when the Dolphins got back on track, it didn't happen like immediately or consistently, as you mentioned. First two drives were still punts. The third drive, they got gifted, and they gifted after the fumble, and one play is a massive touchdown. The consistency, like you're mentioning, is not exactly there. It was enough to win because they are so talented. And I think, I saw you mentioning this weekend on Twitter talking about Trevor Lawrence versus Tua, and I think both players played really well in this game. I really do. Tua, I think PFF had him charted with 4 of what they call big time throws, which are, I don't know the exact terminology and how they grade them, but you can imagine what a big time throw is from an NFL quarterback, right? He had 4, which was more than any other quarterback this week. I think Trevor had 2. I think they both had some really impressive moments. They both kind of got let down by their supporting cast at times. But I think this was such an important game for the Dolphins for the reasons that you mentioned, that they fought back from adversity. To see what Anthony Weaver's defense was able to do in the second half, you're right. You can sometimes overstate off or halftime adjustments, but when you're a first-time coordinator, I guess he was a coordinator for the Texans, but with a new team, first-time coordinator, first game, I mean, to see what you do after halftime, I think was really impressive. To pitch a shutout against an offense like this with Trevor Lawrence, with Christian Kirk and new weapons and Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas, who looked pretty impressive in his NFL debut, I just think that's so impressive. And to get the offensive explosion on the other side and be able to come back like they did, it was gritty is the word. I just keep coming back to that word, is gritty. And it's something I don't think we've necessarily seen out of this team in the past.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of it is a function of some of the guys they brought in recent years too. It's like Jalen Ramsey that's a gritty player. I mean, he fought through a hamstring. Jalen Phillips, I mean, the performance he had in the second half was it would have been spectacular if it was week 18 of his rookie year or second year and he was as healthy as he's ever been in his career. Coming off Achilles, your first game back, I think he had 34 snaps, but none were more impactful than the last 2. He had a pressure that led to a sack on the second to last play, and then sack Lawrence to close it out and give the Dolphins the ball back. And they went far enough as they needed to get a Jason Sanders field goal to win it. So totally agree with that. I mean, I'm always the counterfactual guy, and if they would have lost that game after all they've been through, and now they're dealing with the Tyreek nonsense, and it's not Tyreek's fault, obviously, the cop nonsense and all this storyline, it would be really, really hard to get their minds right for this game on Thursday. Do you think? I mean, I think it's pretty easy to say, but who has more at stake on Thursday? Is it the Dolphins or the Bills?
Oh, the Dolphins. By far. I mean, their recent track record against Buffalo has just been abysmal. I mean, I don't think there's any other word for it. I think just around the league, people just have far more faith in the Bills, even kind of how their offseason went, where they lost a lot of veterans, right? I think Josh Allen is just, when you've got a guy who is, in my mind, definitively the number 2 quarterback in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes, your upside is just unlimited, right? And Tua is a very good player. The Dolphins have a very good roster, but I do think the Bills are still the better team and still the big bad wolf, right, in the AFC East. And until the Dolphins finally overtake them, I just don't think that they're ever going to be viewed as like the leading team in the AFC East. And yeah, I do think this is a big game. It'll be on national TV with everything going around the Dolphins right now. I think it's going to be big for the perception of not just the Dolphins as a team, but Tua specifically. Like if Tua goes out and throws 2 picks and collapses on a potential game-winning drive or game-tying drive or something like that, it's kind of going to be viewed as same old. I think people will maybe forget the kind of performance that he had in week 1. So I do think it is a big deal for the Dolphins and just how they're perceived around the league. And if the Bills lose, I don't think it will be that big of a deal. I think people kind of think that Josh Allen will always have that team in contention. So I definitely think the Dolphins have more at stake. Yeah.
I went back and looked at the stats of this rivalry over the last 12 meetings. It's 5+ years. 5+ years because they had an extra game because of the postseason win. So over the course, basically the last 6 seasons, 1-11. The Dolphins have been outscored by 14.5 points in those 12 games. It's a rivalry game, but rivalry games usually have back and forth. This has been as one-sided of a matchup. It's basically what the Bills have done to the Dolphins or what the Patriots did to the Bills for years and years and years and years. I mean, doesn't matter who the personnel is. you're still going to get your face kicked in by this team. And that's kind of what the Dolphins know that they're fighting against. And, we asked too about that this week is like, how much does that history of supremacy weigh on you? And he's like, well, that's going to be what's written out there until we do something about it. That's going to be the narrative that we can't beat the Bills. And until we do beat them and we beat them consistently, like none of that's going to change. And we have an opportunity to do that this year. We have an opportunity to do that this Thursday. Like this is a team that doesn't their eyes are wide open to what's going on. The fact that this is, windows are kind of a fungible thing in the NFL because you can figure things out, maybe hit on draft picks and extend windows and all that. But with this nucleus that they're put together and they paid a lot of money to, and they extended a lot of these guys, even just in the past few weeks, including the head coach, like you got to get it done at some point. And they have not won a playoff game in 24 years. They know that narrative is absolutely a big, like if they don't win a playoff game this year, it's a failed season. I don't care if they go 14-3 and Tua wins MVP. It's a failed season even if they get the number one seed and they lose the divisional round. It's you've got to win a postseason game. You have to prove that you can do it in January. And I think this is kind of the same way. Is like you put it exactly, the same old Dolphins. Is this going to be the same old Dolphins team that we've seen? God, I've been on this beat for so long, and I've seen this story written. I can't tell you how many times they've had a primetime game against a marquee opponent, all eyeballs on them. This is our moment to make a statement, and they just go like that's like. I think the most recent one, well, obviously the Bills Week 18, the de facto division championship, was the most recent. Yeah. But I think the one that sticks out in my mind is the Eagles game last year. They were flying high when they went to Philadelphia. I think it was a Sunday night game, and the Eagles just manhandled them. They absolutely did. The score was I think a little misleading because the Dolphins kind of fell apart in the fourth quarter, but you never had the sense they were going to beat the Eagles. Self-inflicted wounds. They just do dumb stuff right at bad times. That's to me what I want to see. I want to see them seize the moment, have this opportunity to go and at home. I wrote about this yesterday. It's not going to be Orchard Park South on Thursday. There's not a ton of Bills fans coming down. I think it's the early season game Thursday night. Maybe they're afraid of the heat after all that crying they did 2 years ago. Those Bills fans, for whatever the reason, they're not traveling like the Bills Mafia is not traveling like they usually do. So there will be a lot of aqua and orange in the stands for once for Dolphins Bills, which is a nice change of pace. Tron Johnson, I don't think is playing for the Bills this week, so there's injury concerns for them. I think this is when they do it, right? I think if they don't do it now, they're playing for second in the division for as long as Josh Allen's there, because this is the year that we talked about this last week, and you might think it's a bit overblown, but I think that they've regressed some talent wise year over year, and you're getting these guys at home in September, short week. They got to travel. They had an emotional comeback win too. If not now, when?
I totally agree. If not now, when is the perfect way to put it. It's got to happen at some point, right? It's, as someone who grew up watching a lot of Bengals football, like I've seen Andy Dalton struggle in prime time. As someone who lived in Minnesota the past 10 years, I've seen Kirk Cousins struggle in prime time. Like I'm familiar with prime time, big time woes, and I think the Dolphins are a little bit there right now, and they can overcome that by winning this game. Like what would be your biggest concerns facing the Dolphins as they go against the Bills? I'm wondering how they're going to handle someone like Greg Rousseau, who had 3 sacks, 4 pressures, really broke out in week 1. I thought Miami's offensive line played really well against Jacksonville, especially even someone like Liam Eichenberg, who I know is everyone's favorite whipping boy in Miami, but I thought he had a pretty good game. I'm curious to see how well that Miami's offensive line can protect Tua and keep him clean, and see if they can operate that offense better when he's able to stay inside structure. You mentioned Tron Johnson. He looks like he's not going to play the slot corner for the Bills, might go on injured reserve. Cam Lewis is going to start inside. I mean, he's a kind of a career special teamer. I wonder if that's an area where Mike McDaniel says, well, we already put Tyreek in the slot quite a bit. We already put Jalen Waddle in the slot quite a bit. Let's make sure we attack that part of the field because Teron Johnson isn't in there. I think that's something they could do. I thought Buffalo's offensive line played really well as well. They were first in pass block win rate this past week. How does Jalen Phillips affect that, right? How does Calais Campbell, how does Zach Sealer, how do those guys, are they able to get Josh Allen in positions where he's liable to turn the ball over, which we know he's going to do, right? Josh Allen, that is the Josh Allen experience. Is he going to score on you 3 or 4 times and make 5 amazing throws? Yes. Is he going to give the ball away once or twice? Probably. I think that's probably what the Dolphins are banking on, is creating some of that chaos and hoping they could take advantage, right? I think it's safe to say the Dolphins, as well as we mentioned that there was a pretty impressive performance on Sunday, it's safe to say they got very lucky. Like, a lot of things had to go their way for them to pull out that game. I think they'll probably have to get a little bit lucky against Buffalo too, but I think they can kind of create some of their own luck by, whether it's, some of these sim pressures or more exotic blitzes that Anthony Weaver wants to dial up, get Josh Allen moving a little faster than he wants, and then obviously keep him contained. I mean, it's so disheartening to watch any quarterback, but especially someone like Josh Allen, just barrel his way through 4 or 5 defenders on a 3rd and 8 and pick up a first down. Is there anything more disheartening for a defense than that? It's so hard to deal with and come back from. So I think if they can kind of keep him contained while at the same time making things confusing on the back end, I think that's probably their best approach. But trying to dial up something to stop Josh Allen has got to be the most difficult job in the NFL.
Well, the Dolphins, they've never done it. I mean, like, his
Yeah.
career stats against the Dolphins are sick. I think he's 10-1, 11-1, whatever it is. I mean, he has absolutely owned them. 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, I think, in those games. I mean, he's thrown basically for a season's worth of yards in like 10 or 11 meetings. I mean, he has just absolutely owned them. I think, to your point, you're going to have to win a track meet. You're going to have to win. It's gonna be a game a lot like last week, where you got to get a key turnover, you got to make a key drive late. But look, these are, to me, I want as much information about this team as possible, and we got some information last week. We're gonna get a lot more this week about how they handle these moments, and is this the same old Dolphins? Because the football season's so long, and like, after this week, you look at their next. I mean, I think their next 11 games or something, there might not be 2 playoff teams in that stretch that they face. So, it's going to be really, really not easy, but softer. The hard part of their schedule is the first 2 games in the last 6. We'll see, maybe not the last 6, how good the Browns are, but I mean, their schedule is absolutely front loaded and back loaded. After this week, 10 days off, go to Seattle. I know West Coast trip is never fun, but Seattle Seahawks aren't the Buffalo Bills. I mean, they're just 2 different teams. So, if they can do what we've been talking about and protect the football and not have Josh Allen turn into a Superman, like legit, if he just played the Dolphins, he would be the best quarterback in NFL history. Like, I mean, he is that good against Miami. And make a play late. Don't give up a punt return for a touchdown with a lead in the 4th quarter. Right? All these things that the small thing, well, it's not a small thing, but the key things that you need to do to win games, they fail in those big moments. And it'll be really interesting to see if this is the year with all these DAWG dogs they brought in, like, we're not soft, and we're here to be bullies. This is the week, right? If you're going to be bullies, you got to bully the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how Miami does against this kind of rebuilt Buffalo wide receiver group too. They got rookie Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel. I thought some of those guys made some plays last week, but I think one big thing we have to remember is the Bills were playing the Cardinals defense, which I think is probably the worst defense in the NFL. It's certainly the worst cornerback room in the NFL. Dolphins have Jalen Ramsey and Kendall Fuller, right? This is a really solid group that I feel like is going to have a much better time controlling those wide receivers than maybe Arizona did. And then I feel like even if, Buffalo leans into the run, which we've seen them do in the past, they played 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends at 37.9% of their plays in week 1, 4th highest rate in the NFL. I think that's something you'll see them do again, but I feel the Dolphins are pretty well set up to stop the run. Is David Long the best run defending linebacker in the NFL? Like, he very well might be. He's got to be top 5. Like, he is just so tenacious against the run. I love watching him play at the second level. I think the Dolphins are set up so much better than the Cardinals to face Josh Allen. That's not exactly a genius point there, but I'm just so curious to see what Anthony Weaver does, because he comes from that Baltimore system, right? And I think you saw a lot of the Baltimore Mike McDonald inspired coaches have success this weekend down in town in Tennessee. Darnder Wilson used to be a cornerbacks coach under Mike McDonald. They played really well. The Seahawks did well against Bo Nix, and Anthony Weavers did well down in Miami. And I'm curious to see how they play now that they're playing someone like Josh Allen, because he's just such a different animal, right? I'm a huge Trevor Lawrence fan, but it's just different playing someone like Josh Allen or Lamar or Mahomes, who is a constant creator who can do so much out of structure. And I'm really curious to see what Weaver has in store for that in week 2.
They got to get him to the ground. I mean,
They have to.
They can't have arm tackles, man. You got to drive that dude to the ground. And if you get the 15-yard penalty from time to time, so be it. But you got to make sure you finish the play against him for sure.
Absolutely. And the NFL is so concerned about saving quarterbacks that they might call some of those penalties, especially in a primetime game, especially a star quarterback like Josh Allen. But I'm with you. I mean, I think you take the chance. You want a physical game if you're Miami. I think in this game, I think you want to make sure that you're not going to get out physical or beaten by Buffalo's offensive line, which we said played really well. But I think that Miami has a lot of good pieces, whether it's up front, whether it's second level, whether it's in the back end. And I do feel like they match up really well. It's just Josh Allen, man. What does he do off script? What is he able to do? Is so much of that offense over the years, I feel like, is like, okay, let's see what Josh can do now. We've tried everything we've got. Let's see what Josh can do. Let's see what Josh brings to the table on his own. And if it gets to that point, it's scary because he is such a creator when it goes off script. But I do think there are things that they can do to limit him.
As of 9:44 on Wednesday morning, the line is Dolphins -2.5. Over under 49. What do you like in this game?
You see the Dolphins are favored by 2.5?
2.5.
I think I would probably take the Bills to cover that. I'd probably pick the Bills to win, honestly. It's so hard to pick against Josh Allen. It's really tough. And we don't know. We have no updates on whether Devon Achane or Raheem Mostert are going to play yet. I mean, they haven't practiced. I guess we'll see if they practice today.
Unfortunately for listeners, this is a little early in the week for us to kind of make any broad statements about either of those guys. They missed practice Monday and Tuesday, or simulated practice Monday and Tuesday. McDaniels talks in 45 minutes, so you're out of luck on this one, guys. Sorry. But if they don't have either of those, I think of those two, I think Achane's the more valuable piece.
For sure.
Might be the Pro Bowler, but he was their number 3 receiver last week, and you're talking about taking advantage of guys in the slot. He will feast if he's available in that game, from the slot. So, I guess check back to ProFootballNetwork.com to see whether or not they play. I'll have updates throughout the day and probably tomorrow.
But it's not as if Jeff Wilson can't get the job done if asked. The Dolphins love Jeff Wilson. Like they are willing to give him.
It's a different offense with Achane on the field, though.
It absolutely is. And what do you think? How do you think Jalen Wright would factor in? Could he handle if Achane doesn't play? Would he handle some of that work? Like, is it too early for a 4th-round rookie to have like a big role in week 2? I know there's similar players in terms of speed. I wonder like how involved he would be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he would run the ball a fair amount. I just don't know how much they would trust him doing the wide receiver stuff at this stage of his career. So
and pass protection and stuff like that.
Yeah, it'll definitely limit their offense if he's not available, particularly because do not throw the ball. I don't know how much you saw this to Braxton Berrios or Durham Smythe. I mean, they had in the first half 5 targets, 0 catches, I think 3 or 4 drops. I mean, Smythe basically got benched in the second half, and that, to me, that's really where you miss Odell Beckham. I mean, because you're having to throw to those dudes instead of Odell Beckham, and will it cost the Dolphins on Thursday? We'll see. I think at some point it's going to catch up to them not having a true number 3 wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, they've been one of the most condensed offenses for the last 2 years, like everything going to Tyreek and Jalen, and they are really crying out for that third option. And I think Achane should be that guy if healthy and will be that guy if healthy. But yeah, I don't know if Odell is able to come back mid-season or late in the season. I don't know what his timeline is, but if he's able to contribute something, if Berrios can bring something to the table, I mean, they've got some younger wide receivers, right, that could maybe do something later in the year. But yeah, it is one of the most condensed and consolidated offense in the entire NFL. I think it's fair to say. Yeah, and Tyreek better not get hurt. That's all I got to say, or it's trouble in South Florida. All right, you like the Bills. I picked the Dolphins in our a little internal fun little pick every game. But that's more with my heart than my head. I know the history. I know
what the Buffalo Bills bring. I do think if there is a time for it to happen, as we said, it's Thursday. I think this is a different DNA for this Dolphins team, and I think they get it done.
I think it'll be a great game. I'm so excited to watch it. I would not be surprised if the Dolphins pull it out at all. And I'm excited to watch. I'll go with the Bills, but I'm not going to be surprised if the Dolphins pull it out. I've just got too much respect for this roster, right? There's just too much talent. Mike McDaniel is too good of a coach and too good of a game manager, I think, to ever say that they're have no chance in a game against any team. This could literally be any team in the NFL, and I think the Dolphins would be right there. So I'll go with the Bills based purely on Josh Allen's like off script stuff, but I think it'll be a great game, and I'm very excited to watch it.
Me too. I'll be on location Thursday night. It'll be nice to have Sunday football I can watch, sit home and watch Red Zone, see what it's like to be like the rest of the country. So, all right, Dallas, I appreciate you. You want to do this again next week, maybe?
Yeah, potentially. I'm going to be watching the game at home on Prime Vision. I don't know if anyone else is a Prime Vision fan out there. It's amazing if you didn't use it last year. It's a wider camera angle. It draws the wide receiver routes for you.
Cool.
It shows you who's on the field. It's an amazing way to watch the game if you haven't done it. So I would recommend Amazon Prime Vision. Sounds crazy. It sounds kind of crazy to say Prime Vision. It sounds like something from like 3050 or something.
Right. It's what they watch in Tron, right?
That's right. Yes, exactly.
Well, Jeff Bezos' check is in the mail for that great promo you did for Amazon Prime's product. Dallas, I appreciate the time. Let's talk next week.